Well, Trev, we're going to talk about the offense, defense, and then we're going to dive into some of the big games this weekend. But for the offense, the conversation is so much different going into this bye than it was for the first bye. The first bye, it was kind of like, can they do anything? They were a team that had played 5 games. They had only scored over 30 points twice. Their points per game average was fueled by a 66-7 beatdown of Purdue, but they only scored 23 against Texas A&M. They only scored 14 against Northern Illinois, 28 against Miami, and really needed an early fourth quarter long touchdown run from Riley Leonard to really put that Miami game away. I mean, you never felt like Miami was going to win because their Notre Dame's defense was just so dominant against that Miami offense that day. They weren't a threat to score. But you're like, boy, this offense, man, and they need something. They come out against Louisville, great first quarter, and then they just kind of coasted the rest of the way. And you're just like, all right, this team is good enough to beat the rest of the teams in their schedule, but this isn't a team that's going to do anything in the postseason. And you and I had talked about that at the time, like off the air. Like, if this just ends up being who they are, then you better hope they get the right draw in the first round. Otherwise, they could be a one and done, because I've always said defense will get you to the show, but it's the offense wins championships, right? And Notre Dame just wasn't there. Coming out of this bye, you played 2 quality teams, so it wasn't like you just beat up on 3 really bad teams. You beat up on 1 really bad team the way that good teams are supposed to beat up on a bad team. And then your next 2 games, you played quality opponents. You played a Georgia Tech team that's going to go bowling this year. You played a Navy team that was undefeated. They've got a shot to be a 10-11 win team this season. 2 quality teams you should have beaten, and you should have beaten handily if you were a team that was playing like that elite level team. And Notre Dame did. And it was not a smooth ride necessarily. I would argue that the first 2 games of this stretch, it was flashy, a lot more flashiness, right? Where they've always had spurts here and there, play here and there. There were some spurts where they were really good against Stanford. One of their best games of the year. But then you have the penalty on the first drive, you have the Bocon's fumble, and you're just like, okay. Georgia Tech, you come out in the first quarter, you're not really playing great. Second quarter, you get hot. Third quarter, you get hot. And then the fourth quarter, you just kind of stumble into the, to the end of the game and can't really put them away the way that you need to. And then they come out against Navy, and I thought they just played excellent football for 4 quarters, really. And so the question now is, okay, we know they can get better, but the next 4 games is going to tell us, okay, is this the best they can be, or can they be better? And after breaking down the film of the last 3 games, Trevor, there's no doubt in my mind this team can get better on offense. There's no question that there's another level for this group to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. You can go position by position, player by player, and you can point out and say, with the exception of maybe 4 and 24, right? And you can even make the argument with some of the fumbling issues that maybe even the running back room isn't a complete product. But I would say on offense, breaking down position groups, it is the most. But you can go back and point out and say, I mean, is Jaden Greathouse playing the best football he's going to play in 2024? No. Is Riley Leonard? No. Is the offensive line? No. So there are a lot of reasons to be excited about how much more improvement that this team can have because they're not playing at that level yet. Anthony Knapp isn't playing the best football that he's going to play in 2024. So there's a lot of room to keep moving up. Depending on the player, the room is, higher or lower, right? But there's still room for improvement. Absolutely.
What's funny is you talk about the running backs, and if you look at the numbers for the running backs in the last 3 games, they haven't put up the same lights out numbers they did for the first 5 games. Partly because they've played better defenses for the most part in the last 3-game stretch. Sure. But if you actually break them down, they're actually doing some of the little things better. Like they haven't put the ball on the ground the way that they did a couple times in the first 5 games. The pass blocking has gotten better. Now it's like it's not just, okay, Aeneas is doing a good job in pass pro. I mean, we pointed out several times on Saturday. If you guys are on the board, I did the pass game breakdown. I broke down 11 plays from the pass game on Saturday against Navy that showed, hey, this is where Riley's at. This is why I'm encouraged by what he's doing. Watch him go through these reads. Watch him come backside. They ran trying to get a trick play to get Navy. Navy jumps it. They did a great job. So then what does Riley do out of that? Just the way he was processing, getting the ball out, accuracy, things that Mike Denbrock's done to change and adapt the offense. And then a lot of it also focused on the pass pro and how much that improved. And then there was 2 clips of in that breakdown of Jadarian Price making excellent pass pro reads and then pickups that allowed Riley Leonard to get the ball out. And that was not a part of his game. Jeremiah Love is not ripping off as many of the gash runs he did early because of the way teams are defending Notre Dame. But he's doing the little things better. You know, he's maximizing yardage. His efficiency has gotten better, where early in the season it was kind of boom or bust with him and Jadarian Price. Well, now Jeremiah is looking a lot more like a complete back. He's doing those little things well. You know, if it's 3rd and 2 and I need 3, I got to get 3, and he gets 3, you know, those type of things. And so you're seeing those things come out of the running back room. So even that group, which was so dynamic, the overall level of play has gotten better. And so when we focus on, you know, improvement, there's going to be some technical things we talk about, but it's going to manifest itself in certain categories. And here's the ways that I believe improvement is going to manifest. If there is improvement, this is where we're going to see it statistically. Number 1, points. I mean, they're going to kind of maintain their current level of scoring. I don't know that it necessarily means improving upon their current level of scoring, because they're scoring over 42 points a game in the last 6 games. It's sort of about staying there, but you're doing so in a far more efficient manner, where you're maybe putting games away a little bit earlier. You're not allowing teams to hang around for a little bit like you did Stanford. Let's be honest. I mean, it was 21-7 at halftime, but it was 7-0, 7-7 at the end of the first quarter. Correct? You know, Georgia Tech obviously was, I think, beating. It was a tied. They were beating Notre Dame at the end of the first quarter, 7-0, and then Notre Dame took a lead into halftime. But you know, you let some of these teams hang around a little bit, and can you start putting them away? Even Navy, they kind of let Navy creep back in with that 14-7. You're making it 14-7, and then obviously Notre Dame goes and breaks it open a little bit. But you know, points is going to maintain, but you're doing it a little bit more efficiently. I don't care as much about yards, because I think yards can be a very misleading statistic. I look at, for example, Texas A&M. You look at Notre Dame and LSU this year. LSU had, I think, about 60, 70 more yards against Texas A&M than Notre Dame did, but they had the same number of points as Notre Dame did against Texas A&M. And that you look and say, okay, well, yards don't matter as much. It's about what are you doing with those yards, and the play to me that creates evidence that this team is more efficient in what they need to do is yards per play. That's a more indicative sign of how are you performing offensively. It means you're being more efficient and you're generating more big plays, which is another thing that I think we'll see more of this pass game. And that was the biggest takeaway coming out of the Navy game, was how many big plays they made in the pass game. And during this 3-game stretch, we saw a little bit more of that. Not as much against Georgia Tech, although you did see that slot fade, but you saw some big plays in the pass game against Stanford, but then you really started to see it in different ways against Navy. So points, yards per play, more big plays, and the final piece for me, Trevor, if this offense improves, you're going to see a lot more of what we saw against Navy. And what I mean by that is better on 3rd down. That's going to be a big, big part of it. Notre Dame has had 3 games where they were over 50% in 3rd down percentage. Now, over 50% is very good, but it's not like this unsurmountable. Oh, you just can't get to fit. The top 7 3rd down teams in the country are all at 50% or higher. So it's a statistic you should shoot for. In the 3 games where Notre Dame has been above 50%, they have scored 66, 49, and 51 points. It's not a coincidence. It's not, because this is not going to be a team. They need to do a better job creating big plays. You have to be more explosive, but they're not going to look like the 2015 offense all of a sudden. They're not, especially in the pass game. But to me, more success on 3rd down gives you more opportunities for some of those bigger plays. More efficiency, so better yards per play, get you in a better opportunity to convert 3rd downs. I mean, there was a lot of 3rd and 2s and the 3rd and 3s and 3rd and 6s that they were facing. And then 3rd and 6s weren't ideal, but 3rd and 6 is a whole lot better than 3rd and 10, 3rd and 11, 3rd and 15, which is where they were getting to at times in past games. A lot of 3rd and 2s, a lot of 3rd and 3s, a lot of 3rd and 1s, which are a lot more easier to manage. And then the more you convert 1st downs, the more chance there is for big plays. And that's when you look at and you break this down, Trevor, that's how you become a big time offense. I mean, you've got to move the chains, and then by moving the chains, you give yourself more opportunities to make big plays. An example from the game against Navy is the 64-yard touchdown run. Notre Dame comes out on first down. Riley Leonard scrambles for 7. Now you're in 2nd and 4. Next play, or 2nd and 3. Next play, Jeremiah Love, 3-yard gain. You're in 1st and 10. Your offense is rolling. Next thing you know, boom, 64-yard touchdown run because Navy was spread out. You get into 3rd and 1 in that situation. All of a sudden, that third play, they're crowding the box, and maybe you don't get off that big play. So you move the chains, you're going to score more points. And so I think third down efficiency, a jump in third down efficiency. The good news is, Trevor, they were not very good on third down against Georgia Tech. But 2 of their 3 best games of the season, including their best game of the season on third down, have come in the last 3 games. And so that's something that they need to continue to build on in this final stretch of play.
Yards per play and third down conversions are almost directly correlated, right? What's the best way to be efficient on third down? Put yourself in favorable positions, especially when you have the backfield that Notre Dame does. 3rd and 1 should be converted 90% of the time when you have a 6'4", 216-pound mobile quarterback. When you have a backfield that has Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and Aeneas Williams and Kedron Young, who we brought up yesterday, if there's a back that I needed to rely on to get me 4 yards every time I carry, it's 21, right? So staying ahead of schedule and winning on 1st and 2nd down, all of those correlate with yards per play. And it's no mystery that one of the best percentages that Notre Dame has had on the season against Navy is also one of the best yards per play average that they had on the season as well. So as long as Notre Dame can stay ahead of schedule, because they are a very rhythm-based offense, as long as they can stay ahead of schedule or even just on schedule for what they're planning on doing, because it's unrealistic to say, well, just here's a way to not have a bad third down percentage. Don't face a third down. It's like, well, I mean, that's going to happen. Right. Like, especially
against the better teams. Right.
Right. Especially once you get into the postseason and you're playing a better defense than Virginia's, or you're playing a better defense than Florida State's. You're going to face third downs. How do you increase your odds of converting at least 50% of those? Put yourself in favorable third down situations. Where I start to get a little anxious watching Notre Dame plays when they're in that 2nd and 11, or when they're in that, 1st and 15 after a pre-snap penalty on first down or something silly, right? So as long as you can stay on schedule and do what you're supposed to in the early downs, yards per play is a direct correlation to that. So that's going to be a key indicator of what I'm going to be watching here in the next 4 games.
So when you talk about, Trev, areas where Notre Dame needs to get better and where they can improve, what will lead to that improvement? Number 1 is your offensive line still needs to be better. What encouraged me about the Navy game was it was the first time we really saw this group as a whole handle a lot of the twists and stunts that they've struggled with all year. I mean, we've talked about how maddening it was that teams would just do this stuff, and we didn't see it against Georgia Tech because Georgia Tech doesn't run a ton of that stuff. They just whoop Notre Dame at times straight up, Zeke Biggers especially. That was encouraging. I think the makeup of the new look offensive line, which is going to be their 4th lineup of the season, right? So they had the original starting lineup with Jagasol. Then you see the opening game starting lineup, which stays until the 2 injuries happen against Purdue. Then you get that new look lineup with Coogan and Spindler in the lineup. And then now we get into game 8, and they have a 4th offensive line look. Now so it's your 2nd left guard. You've had at times this season, not in games, but thinking where you're going to be 2 different left tackles. Now 2 left guards, 2 centers, 2 right guards. And the only position that's been sort of from the beginning of fall camp until now kind of locked in is right tackle, the Emil Wagner, right? Well, what did we talk about yesterday? Has Emil been great? No, but has it been Emil as right tackle probably been the most consistent position of the season? Probably. Well, it's not a shock that that's the guy that's been in that position from the day 1 of fall camp to now. So the question now is, can Joe Rudolph, who again, I've got a lot of issues with things that Joe Rudolph has done so far at Notre Dame and think decisions that have been made, but you have to give credit where credit is due, which is that they're peaking at the right time. Yes, they finished poorly against Georgia Tech, and they started poorly against Georgia Tech, but they did some really nice things in the middle. I thought they played, a rough start against Stanford, but then finished really well in that game. Okay, well, you made the decision to put Billy Schrout at left guard, which was the right one. It was late, but it was the right one. Now it's about building on what we saw against Navy. It's about, okay, be a little bit more physical at the point of attack. Get your interior guys to move their feet better through contact. That's something that we're going to need to see more of in the run game. And continue with what we saw in the pass game. I was very encouraged that you saw such an effective pass game performance. And the thing you guys will notice in that breakdown, if you go look at it, Trevor, I know you watched it. You didn't delete it this time, by the way. I appreciate that very, very much.
I got you.
I'm not going to let you live that down, at least for this season. I got
you shouldn't. You should.
But how many times do we see Riley Leonard sitting back in the pocket, just calmly looking through his progressions and then snapping the ball off? And then there were times when he did get pressure, and it was a situation where one of them was like an edge pressure from a linebacker. And Jadarian Price does a great job of it looks like the guy's going to come off the edge, and Jadarian steps to him. And then the guy slants inside. Jadarian steps inside, washes him down, and Riley just slide steps to the left, calmly slide steps, snaps the ball off to Mitchell Evans for a conversion. And you're just like, okay, that's the sign of a kid who's a lot more comfortable in the pocket, because I would assume going into that week of prep, the offensive line was giving him time in practice, which allowed him to be more comfortable in games. They did some things schematically with 7-man, and there was even one play where they ran an 8-man protection at a 2-man route against a 6-man coverage, and he puts that ball right over top of one and in between two guys for a 20-plus yard gain. And then the 4th down play where Jordan Faison just does a great job of just winning. I mean, that's really what it came down to. It's like Navy actually had the play that they called defended. And then Jordan Faison has to kind of go win. I break it all down on the video, so you definitely want to check that out at boards.oshbreakdown.com. It's for premium members only. But, like, that's stuff we haven't seen, Trevor. We would see a lot of receivers just when they were covered, just kind of, okay, I'm covered. And then we'd see Riley Leonard just immediately take off running. But on that play, he stayed poised in the pocket. They gave him time. He slide steps, and he hits Jordan Faison over the middle for a huge 4th down conversion. We just saw so much of that. And it really comes down to their ability to give the quarterback time to throw, their ability to handle all the line games and the 2nd and 3rd level pressures that Navy was throwing at them, and then Riley Leonard trusting the people around him more. And to me, that starts up front, Trevor. So if this offense is going to get better, that performance against Navy needs to be the baseline for what we see moving forward. It never dips below that. It's either there or better in these next 4 games. If that happens, honestly, that's really all they need to do. There's a couple things we'll point to that I think can get better and should get better. But if that's all that changes in these next 4 games, this offense is going to be pretty good.
Yeah, overall, they need to look at the Navy game as like the benchmark of that's the new standard, right? The new standard is what they did against Navy.
I think that's a much better word than what I use for baseline. I think benchmark is a much better word, because it's like, you're here. You're never lower than this. Mm-hmm. I think that, yes, very well done. Your B word is better than my B word.
Best B word of them all is Bryan. I got you. But
you're getting good at this sucking up thing. I'm digging it.
Listen, man, it's. I didn't delete your post. I mean, look, I'm on a roll this weekend, man. Look at me.
You are.
But as long as Notre Dame, Joe Rudolph, and Mike Denbrock can take this Navy game and use this as the benchmarking tool of, okay, what did we do well in this game? Where can we implement? Because Notre Dame's offensive line, especially in pass protection, did the best job that they had done all season in handling line games as well. So if you can take that and say, this is where we're building from, instead of in weeks previous, it's like, okay, where are we building from? Making sure one of our guards doesn't get pile driven back into the quarterback's lap on quick game. That was the baseline before. Now the baseline is, okay, we were able to handle these line games. We were able to handle different shifts. We were able to protect the quarterback well. We were able to open up some creases in the run game. Now it's time to start fine-tuning these things for when you come against a team who is able to do as effectively what Navy's defensive line was doing, but they just have bigger, faster athletes, right? So using this Navy game as a benchmark for the rest of the season and then vaulting into the postseason is going to be crucial for Joe Rudolph and the offensive line, because if that's going to be it, if the worst we see from Notre Dame for the rest of this season is basically a copy paste from what they did against Navy, we're having a conversation going into the postseason of, talking about who can this offense move the ball on to who is going to stop this offense with just how many different ways they can hurt you. So it's an exciting conversation to have, man. And the offensive line holds a key to a lot of different things.
When you talk about the offensive line too, Trevor, they're in a position where they just can't afford another injury. That's going to be a part of this whole thing too for this whole team. But I think when I talk about the offensive line, we talk about the twist, the stunts, the pass pro, and all that kind of stuff. The final piece for me is going to be I do want to see a little bit more. They don't have the power potential of the starting off the line we saw to start the season. I don't believe. Maybe you could argue that Rocco and Billy Schrouth have the similar power potential as Pendleton and Billy. I don't agree with that. I think Pendleton when he was right, was the most powerful blocker they had this season. Like when he was on, he was their most powerful blocker. But they can still get movement. The issue is I don't see Pat Coogan getting the kind of movement Ashton Craig could get. It's just not going to happen. But they can do better if they do a better job of moving their feet. And I showed that in the run game breakdown where when Pat gets in trouble, it's when he stops his feet and starts to lean forward and then he goes down. He's got to really work his feet through contact with a better base. Joe Rudolph has got to get that corrected. He's got to get that corrected. That's the final piece to me in the run game of the offensive line doing what they can do is just work your feet. Sometimes you're going to hit a guy and your feet are going to stop, but then, it's like recover and rally, right? And get that push. We need to see them do a little bit better job of that. Same with Emil Wagner. But that's the final piece for me. But I think the offensive line, if we never see them dip below what we saw against Navy, then they're going to lay a very strong foundation to what Notre Dame can do moving forward. Next piece of this, Trevor, is the pass game. And there's a couple things that need to come into play here. And the first one is, Trev, we just need to see the wide receivers play better. I mean, that's going to be a big thing. I'm curious to get your thoughts when you watch the game. Again, I felt like this receiving core was playing with a lot more urgency than we saw in the past. I thought Jaden Greathouse was doing that. I think the getting a healthy Jordan Faison back was a big part of that because he brings a different type of style than they've had in the past. I thought Chris Mitchell did some really nice things. We saw Bo Collins had the big long play, but in that breakdown, I also showed that there was a post route where Bo smoked a guy on that post route. And then they ended up running an adjustment off of that later that Jordan Faison caught. But not that I think Riley should have gone there, but had he decided to go there, that's probably a touchdown if he gets that ball out there. I mean, so you're seeing them getting open deep more. You're seeing them win. The route that Jaden Greathouse ran on I break down his route in the video of why it was such a great route. I talk about the job Jordan Faison did. We saw the receivers winning on Saturday, Trevor, and we haven't seen a whole lot of that. And that's something that also has to continue. I mean, they've been really up and down, mostly down this last month of the season. They're the one group in this last stretch that I don't think has necessarily played a whole lot better until Navy. And I actually thought the receivers were coming off probably their worst game of the season, maybe since Northern Illinois against Georgia Tech. And they bounced back and had and again, it's not just the results, Trevor. I'm talking about how they played. I thought they played harder. I thought they ran with greater purpose, greater urgency, and much sharper on their routes than what we had really seen for a big chunk of the season. That was incredibly encouraging. And now, like you said earlier, that's got to be the benchmark. That's got to be the standard. It's got to be that or better moving forward.
They competed. Right? Like they competed on Saturday, which is just something that we hadn't seen consistently from this group through the first 7 games until they got to Navy. There were spurts, right? Last drive of the Texas A&M game, you see Bo Collins competing for that back shoulder one-on-one. There were instances throughout the season, very minor, that you saw the receivers compete. But before, it was almost like you watch them play, you watch their get off from the line of scrimmage, you watch how they adjust to getting pressed, you watched basically the different alignments that they're going to face throughout the season. And it was a lot of, well, I hope I get open. I hope I get open. Hope he sees me. And on Saturday, it was a lot of the opposite. It was, I'm just going to beat you off the line of scrimmage. I'm just going to run a better route than what you can cover. I don't know if it was some mental adjustment that they made throughout the week, or if it in their mind it was just, well, we know Navy can't cover us, so we're going to play as such. One thing, I'm a big trend guy, and one thing that I've noticed in the games where Jordan Faison is a receiving threat, the receivers kind of naturally as a group just kind of start playing a little better. I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's the rest of the receivers in the room going, well, we're going to let a lacrosse guy run
No,
better
it's his
routes than
energy. It's
yeah,
his energy. I mean, it's the
yeah,
way he plays. I
because he
think that
competes.
it raises the rest of the room up. It's like,
Hmm.
and I think that there's competition there. I think it's part of it, but I think it's
Yeah,
the energy he plays the game with. I really do.
yeah,
He's
yeah,
he's for the receiver room. People say, who's the Kyron Williams figure? I mean,
yeah,
right now, that's the closest thing we have is this kid's just out there battling, and he has an early drop, and you're like, come on, bro, you got to make that catch. And then he just comes right back and makes some really tough catches and big plays, and you're just like, I think they feed off of that.
oh
And
yeah,
when they also get involved early, I think that matters too, Trevor. I mean, Jaden Greathouse going out on the first time he wins that, first route he runs, down the field, he wins, and they get that big play. I think that can spark the entire group. Like, hey, if we do what we're going to do, Riley's getting us the ball today. Let's go
yeah,
put in the work. When I would argue, there's times if they would have put in better work, Riley would have been able to get the ball to him. That's a different conversation. But I think it's the combination of that fast start in the throwing game combined with, I think Jordan Faison, when he's out there, brings an energy level that they need. And Notre Dame did a great job of using him at the Z and the X
yeah.
in this game. He wasn't just Z. He was playing both outside spots in this game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, Jordan Faison is a guy we talk about all the time. Get the ball in the hands of your playmakers. And Jordan Faison is just a guy where when the football's in his hands, good things happen. He's a lot more dangerous after the catch than what some people deem him to be. Honestly, he's really good deep down the field. He's a solid route runner. So he's been one of the guys that I've been watching over the last couple of weeks, especially coming alive in the Navy game, where he, to your point, does bring that energy to the rest of the receiving room. And I think that with the Navy game being the benchmark moving forward, it's going to be a lot of what did we do well in this game? What can we implement? And Notre Dame has a good enough receiver room with enough talent where now you can start plugging different people into different spots and saying, okay, like now it's your moment. Go out and make a play. Hey, now it's going to you. Go out and make a play. So there's a lot to be excited about moving forward. The chemistry between Riley Leonard and the receivers is getting better and better. You saw that with multiple times Riley Leonard gets pressured, breaks a pocket, and in previous games, he's just looking to run right away. Against Navy, he's stepping up, maybe drifting outside of the pocket a little bit after a gap escape, but he's keeping his eyes down the field. And that goes to the chemistry and the trust that you have in your guys. And sometimes it wasn't. Like sometimes he would end up looking to run, right? We talked a lot this week about how the ball, actually, I think 76 of his rushing yards came via scramble, not design quarterback run, but he was looking to pass the ball first. And that's that's showing me that that's belief in the system, that's belief in your guys. And that's just, it all bodes well for Notre Dame's passing game moving forward.
I got some numbers I want to show you, Trevor, and it really factors into what I see as a trend that is showing that this offensive line is this offense is starting to figure things out a little bit. And the trend is, I look at one of the statistics that PFF keeps is your production when blitzed. And early in the season, Notre Dame, in the first 5 games, Riley Leonard went 26 of 39 for 254 yards, 1 touchdown, and no interceptions when blitzed. Not when pressured, but when blitzed, when the opponent blitzed. 66.7 completion percentage. That is a 254. That is a 6.5 yards per attempt average. And it is a sub 10 yards per play or yards per completion at 9.8. In the last 3 games, Riley Leonard has gone 22 of 31 when blitzed, which is good for a 71% completion rate, which is up over 4.3. And he is remember I said he was at 9.8 yards per completion, right? In the last 3 games, he's been at 9.7 yards per attempt when blitzed. So they went from 9.7 yards per completion to 9.7 yards per attempt, and the yards per completion has gone up to 13.6. That's been a big factor in this as well.
Yeah.
And part of it is because the offensive line is showing steady improvement when teams blitz, they're picking it up. It shows that Riley Leonard is doing a better job of knowing where to go with the football. They're not just beating teams with throws down the field. And in the first 5 games, they had 1 touchdown against the blitz. In the last 3 games, they've had 3 passing touchdowns against the blitz. And that doesn't even include all the scrambles he does. And that's what was effective on Saturday as well, is when they were able to keep a body on a body, then he was able to be effective because, somebody made a comment about, we'll only pass for 178 yards. Well, if you know football and you study football, what you'll realize is that Riley Leonard actually had 254 yards in the throwing game on Saturday against Navy. 254 in 3 quarters. Why? Because he also had 76 yards on scrambles. That's a passing play. You're getting results in a passing. So you're like, you had X number of 20-yard gains in a passing game. Well, add another one because he had a 24-yard scramble on a passing play as well. He had a 17-yard scramble on a passing play as well.
He also doesn't even include that. He also had a 24-yard completion that was called back.
Right, that's right. So, okay, so is that just a one-off, or is this a sign of things to come? The return of Billy Schrauth, the return of Jordan Faison to health, the fact that Riley Leonard is more and more comfortable in the offense, the receivers are getting more comfortable in the offense, they're getting healthier, is a reason why I think that you look at it and say, okay, I think they can continue this. There's no doubt. And then there's some, continued some schematic things that you'll see them adjust to that I'd like to see based on who they're playing, but that's a big key. And then the final one, Trevor, we don't need to spend a lot of time on this, but I still think there's room for improvement in the run game if they're more willing to maybe mix up a couple different outside wrinkles. I still want to see them be more willing 3 or 4 times a game, really attack outside with your run game. Jets, quick pitches, sweeps, outside zone, something that allows you to get the ball outside in the run game so teams just can't focus on crashing. Because a couple of those line games that if I'm sitting there looking at it might not have worked against Navy because of the way they play their safeties. But I'm thinking like some of these teams that are running some line games that I've looked at, like Stanford and some teams, I was rewatching the Louisville game, if they would have ran like just a sweep on that play, buck sweep, something. The way that they're twisting and the way that they're stunting, you're going to seal that sucker inside if you catch them on one of those, and it's going to go because they're all just kind of teeing in on A to B gap. That's what teams are focused on. So that's a final piece of it, Trevor, that I look at. So here's something that we decided to do kind of last second. And this is, okay, if the offense is going to make the jump we need them to make, who are the players that are Notre Dame most needs to really step up and play well down the stretch? One of the guys we agree on for sure, and we'll talk about him at the very beginning, and that's Riley Leonard. Riley Leonard has played much better the last 3 games. There's still room for him to be even better, especially as a thrower. There's still it's not like astronomical numbers, right? I mean, part of the reason he's only averaged, I'm looking at let me pull up his numbers here real quick. His yards per game numbers from the last 3 games are not going to light the world on fire. But part of that is because he didn't play the fourth quarter of 2 of those games, and he only played 1 possession of the third quarter in another one of those games. So when you look at the last 3 games and you average up his passing yards, he's right at 203 passing yards per game over the last 3 games. But again, that's a little misleading because of what we talked about. But two of his 3 highest yards per attempt games have come in the last 3 games. He's thrown 5 touchdowns in the last 3 games. He's only thrown 1 pick in the last 3 games. Like, he's getting better, but there's even another level for him to get to, in my opinion. And so he is, and then continue to make plays with your legs, continue to be that winner, be willing to be, you know what I liked about the Navy game? He was willing to be aggressive, but he didn't do things that put them in position where maybe some turnovers could have happened. You know what I mean? Like that shot that was between 3 guys, that was an aggressive play, but it wasn't a stupid play. It was like, whew, caught a break on that one. But Riley Leonard still holds the key as an individual player. I mean, the line as a unit is the most. But as far as an individual player, Riley Leonard still holds the key for this Notre Dame offense down the stretch.
Yeah, we've said it week in and week out. This team goes as far as what Riley Leonard takes them, and there's a lot of different facets that go into that, right? Like Riley Leonard is not the only factor for offensive success, but he's a quarterback. He drives the offense, and he holds the key to what they're going to be able to do. To your point, Riley Leonard took a lot of calculated risks against Navy, and they weren't errant throws, they weren't boneheaded mistakes. It wasn't, well, I'm just going to throw it deep into double coverage because we have to push the ball down the field. It was very. It was very calculated, right? It was almost methodical how he was able to sit back and pick apart different aspects of the Navy defense. And that's something that needs to be consistent moving forward and is still an aspect that could get better. I don't get tied up into Riley Leonard's passing stats too much because I've said this week in and week out. He's a guy that I will always pay attention to his total output. I will always pay attention to his total yards in a game and his total contribution to the offense because that's who he is. That's who he was at Duke. That's who he's been at Notre Dame. I'm not saying that he doesn't have the ability to throw for 300 yards. He has had a game where if he would have finished the game, he would have been over 300 yards. He would have had another game where if he finished, he was on pace for like 294. So he has that ability, but sometimes you just don't need him throwing in the fourth quarter when you're winning by 37 points or when you're winning by 24 points, right? So, yeah, there's room for improvement with him for sure. But how Riley Leonard's play will dictate how well the offense does in the stretch.
No doubt. And when they get into the postseason especially, they're going to need him to be a playmaker.
Oh, yeah.
The next one we have the same – we have a similar position group, but we have a different player. Okay. Let's go offensive line.
The player that I have picked out for this one is Billy Schrauth because, one, his health plays a factor for me. He's coming back off of an injury, and – we saw how good the offensive line played when Billy Schrauth was healthy, but I don't think he was at 100% against Navy. He wasn't. His ankle was heavily taped. We didn't see as much of the leg drive as we've seen from him when he's been fully healthy. Now he has the bye week to get healthy again. But just on top of his individual performance that he's going to be responsible for, he is now having a hand in Anthony Knapp's development as well at left tackle. Like, it's no mystery to me that Anthony Knapp had one of his best games in a Notre Dame uniform as a starter on Saturday, and he had a veteran with experience with multiple years at Notre Dame lined up next to him opposed to a redshirt freshman, right? All respect to Sam Pendleton, but there's just looks and things that Billy Schrauth has seen in the games that he's played in that Sam Pendleton's kind of like learning on the fly a little bit.
They both needed veterans around them, and they didn't have it.
Exactly.
And that was a bad combination. It's not a knock on either one of them. It's just that's why you should have early in the season flipped your guards.
Oh, yeah. So Billy Schrauth for me on the offensive line, he is kind of that key driver moving forward for just a multitude of different reasons. One, got to stay healthy. Billy Schrauth has to stay healthy for the rest of the season. Two, his individual performance, he's one of those guys that he is also not playing the best football that he's going to play in 2024. And once he kind of moves up into that next step, the offensive line is going to start becoming more dominant as a unit. And then also the third facet for me for Billy Schrauth is his impact on Anthony Knapp. His impact on Anthony Knapp is going to help greatly. And I think that's something that shouldn't be overlooked. So that for me is my guy on the offensive line.
I'm going with Anthony Knapp as mine.
Yeah.
And I agree with everything you said about Billy Schrauth. But at the end of the day, Anthony Knapp has to build on the performance he had against Navy.
Totally.
Has to. And he's slowly, like early in the season, I thought Anthony regressed from the first couple games. I thought he got progressively worse as the season went on. And he had just some boneheaded mistakes against Stanford. But you started to see some snaps where it's like, okay, he kind of held his own there on that one in ways that he hasn't in the past. Against Georgia Tech, again, had some bad misses, had some mistakes, freshman mistakes, but you started to see some one-on-one routes like, okay, can he do that more often? And then it's Navy did. And he just looked a lot more comfortable. You guys will see it in the breakdown that I did. So he's got to build on what he's done. He's not going to be a world beater. He's not going to look like Ronnie Stanley or Mike McGlinchey or Quentin Nelson down the stretch. I don't need him to. They just need him to do his job more consistently. And he is going to be the key because at the end of the day, center's important, right guard's important, right tackle's important. Billy Stroud's incredibly important for the reasons you mentioned. But at the end of the day, if the left tackle doesn't play well, this Notre Dame offense is going to be limited. We've seen it, whether it's penalties, pressures, whatever the case may be, the left tackle has to play well. So, Anthony, if this team blows up in the last 4 games and really takes off offensively, you're going to be able to look back and be like, oh, wow, Anthony Knapp played really well during that stretch. It has to happen. I don't know that they can be better against the teams they're going to play if he doesn't play better. I think it's a must. Third key, we both went with pass catchers. You go ahead and start off with the pass catcher that you're focused on.
Yeah, for me, it's going to be Jaden Greathouse. He has shown time and time again that he can be a big play factor in this offense. And we brought it up earlier in the week that, he had 1 catch for 42 yards against Navy, and then he wasn't really looked at after that. I think he had 1 additional target, and I think the ball was it was a little short. But Jaden Greathouse, to me, for a lot of the reasons, this is going back before the start of the season, but his leadership in that room and what he was doing in the spring and what he was doing throughout fall camp, being the first one in line in drills and just his overall skill set, he is one of the key pieces for me to unlocking the pass game. It's no mystery that Bo Collins is Riley Leonard's go-to guy. Like he has shown that he's kind of all reliable in that offense, which is fantastic. But I'm a firm believer that a receiving core can only be as good as its complementary pieces as well. You see that at multiple levels of football. The best receiving cores in the best receiving cores in college and the NFL are guys where they have that guy, and right now that's Bo Collins for the Irish. But right behind their number 1 guy is almost like a 1B guy. It puts defenses in binds. It makes them choose who they're going to attempt to stop that game, which is one thing that makes Louisville so dangerous. They had Ja'Cory Brooks, and they had Colin Lazy, and they had Chris Bell. So getting an additional guy to step up in addition to a Bo Collins, for me, that's going to be a guy like Jaden Greathouse, somebody who's had a lot of high expectations coming into the season, has all the skill set and the potential in the world. Now it's just going out and seeing that consistently.
I really hope Jaden Greathouse is targeted more moving forward. I really do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think the guy that could hold the key to this pass offense really taking off, Trevor, in the final 4 games and then in the postseason is Mitchell Evans. I think if Notre Dame can get Mitchell Evans back to being Mitchell Evans, like if there's some way somehow, and I don't know if it's in there, it could just be the knee injury. He's just not that guy. You won't see that again until next year when he's in the NFL, that year 2 removed from the surgery thing. Maybe now he's getting to that period where he's a full year removed from the injury. I mean, we're getting to that point now. This is about when it happened last year. My hope is that the deeper we get in the season, the more he plays, the better he gets. We saw like a little bit of a flash of that this past weekend against Navy. He had that first catch that I broke down how it got there for a 12-yard gain. Did a really nice job working hard on an over route to get open on a play where Notre Dame was trying to fake. They were trying to run a trick play. Navy played it, and then Riley finds Mitchell coming across on an over route. You say, okay, that's kind of a glimpse of what the impact that Mitchell can do. But if they can get Mitchell Evans back to being an impact player in the pass game, over the middle of the field, working down the field like he was last year, this offense could be scary good. It really could. And I thought his effort in the run game was better this weekend. He did have a pass block where he got knocked into the quarterback, but he was at least battling. He just didn't anchor great, technically, but he was battling. But Mitchell Evans is going to have, they need not, and it doesn't even matter about like they need more production from the tight end position. I don't care about that. Like if your offense is rolling, your offense is rolling. If it happens to go to the tight ends, great. It's more about he's really talented and he presents a matchup opportunity that to me, if he plays better, then the guys around him are a lot more like if you start getting super worried about defending Mitchell Evans, there's some things you can do with Jaden Greathouse that are going to make him more dynamic and more impactful. And same thing with Bo Collins. And all of a sudden you're running some, in posts into the boundary at a deuce formation because that backside safety, as soon as he sees Mitchell Evans run that deep in cut, he's going to jump on him. So you're banging a post route behind it, things along those lines. And so you're running crossing routes where you're running Mitchell Evans on a deep in cut and you're bringing Jaden Greathouse on a crosser because they're so focused on Mitchell Evans. You can bang that crossing route to Jaden Greathouse and he can catch and run. That only happens when Mitchell starts going off. and they need him to get back to being the Mitchell Evans of last season. I thought we actually saw a little bit of that on Saturday. I thought he was running routes with a little bit more intensity at times. There's also times he doesn't run the routes with a lot of intensity because I don't think he thinks he's going to get the ball. But they've got to get him back to being that guy. And look, if it's Eli Raritan, great. If it's Cooper. But Mitchell Evans to me is the player that if he plays to his full potential this year adds the most, because Eli could be a big play weapon at tight end. I think Mitchell provides more of that. I'm that dude, like 3rd and 7, game on the line. I'm that dude. You can't cover me. And even if you do, my quarterback's just got to throw it up at around 9 feet, and I'm going to go up and get it. You know what I mean? Like, he has that. And I don't know that they have that weapon in the past. And I know Bo's the go-to guy, and Bo's done some really nice things this year. But he's not that. And when the Notre Dame offense was really good last year, you had Mitchell Evans as a big reason for it. And sometimes when they weren't good, they'd have been even worse. He was all they had. He was all they had against Duke. He was a driver of the success they did have against Ohio State. And so to me, if he can emerge and really finish the season off well, get some rest during this bye week, and come back with the right mindset of, hey, I've got 4 games in the postseason to show NFL scouts what I can do, number one. But then more importantly, hey, I know my team needs me to be me again. And I need to be I need to have the right mindset. I need to have the right mentality. I need to have the right effort. I need to have the right focus. And if I do that, the quarterback's going to get me the ball. And we need to see that for Mitchell. He could be such an impactful player for this football team in the final 4 games of the season and going into the postseason. Like, could you imagine if Notre Dame goes into the playoffs and we just saw a 4-game stretch from Mitchell Evans like the one he had last year before he got hurt? Could you imagine what this offense will look like at that point in time? I mean, I'm dreaming of him running verticals and linebackers panic. So because what they'll do is start bracketing him. That the Mike linebacker kind of buzz underneath them, and then so then what do you do? Now all of a sudden I'm running angle routes with my running backs, I'm running crossers with my slots, I'm doing all these kind of things to kind of counter that, and you don't have answers for. So Mitchell Evans to me could be a huge piece, him stepping up, huge piece to what this offense really taking it. Because somebody asked yesterday, can Bice hold Notre Dame's going to finish the year at 40 points per game? And we're like, they'd have to average like 46.5 points a game the next 4 games to get there. That's going to be tough. But as I was thinking about the answer to this question, I was like, if Mitchell Evans starts playing the way he did last year in the middle of the season, this offense could score that close to that number of points per game. They're scoring 42 points a game last 6 games, and Mitchell Evans has done hardly anything. I mean, he's got like a couple catches here and there. I think didn't he catch like 4 against Georgia Tech, but they were all like 4 for 26 yards. Yeah. Didn't catch a pass against Stanford, 3 for 14 against Louisville, 2 for 15 against Miami of Ohio, 3 for 27 against Purdue. So like I said, in the 6-game win streak, they're averaging over 42 points a game, and Mitchell Evans' season high so far is 27 yards. What does this offense do if Mitchell Evans gets back to being a 50, 60, 70 yard per game guy?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, and I won't harp on it too much because you covered a lot of the things that are all factual. It just puts defenses in a bind, puts them all in a bind. And I was thinking about this when you were talking about it. If Mitchell Evans can put together a 4 or 5 game stretch that just starts with USC and then just carries into the postseason, this offense becomes – I mean, we're having serious conversations about at the start of the season, you go from what can this offense do to what can't they do? I mean, that's legitimately, that's the conversation that you start having, which gets really, really exciting.
Because think about what we were talking about coming in the season, Trevor, about why we were excited about this team. Riley Leonard and what he can do. Well, he's starting to get there. The dynamic backfield, which we said all offseason, this group has this chance to be special. Well, they have been. They've been outstanding. But the receiving core was going to be better than it was last year. Hasn't been so far. Hopefully it can get there. It started to show some promise. This Charles Jagasal's got a chance to be a young star on the offensive line. Well, we're not going to see him Ashton Craig has a chance to be one of the stars, best centers in the country, potentially, going into next year with a real strong year this year, really good building year this year. And then we don't get to see that. Billy Schrouth, he's going to be a stud, and he could be their best lineman this year. And he was for the first few games, in my opinion, at least most consistent, most steady. And then he gets hurt. Well, now he's back. But one of the other drivers of our optimism about this team is you got one of the best tight ends in college football coming back this year. A guy that before he got hurt was ripping people up. You look at the stretch he had last season before he got hurt. 7 for 75, 6 for 134, 4 for 71, 2 for 13, and then 5 for 66. If we see that stretch in the next 4 games, if he does that for the next 4 games, this offense is going to be ridiculously good. Ridiculously good. Because I just don't know. Because, I would say Bo Collins has played better this season from a consistency standpoint than anything they had last year. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, he's played 8 games. He's 1 catch away from tying what Mitchell Evans did last year as the team leader in receptions. 359 yards receiving, so he's 125 yards away from the team lead from what we had last year, and there's still 5 games before he gets to that, or 4 before he gets to 12, because Chris Tyree only played 12 games. The odds of him not getting to that mark are slim. So you look at it and say, you get Jordan Faison back, that's huge. He's been banged up since game 1. He has not been healthy since really the opener. He had a couple plays here and there. I think Louisville, he looked healthy. Then he kind of got banged up again in that game, I believe. And you're getting him back and healthy. And then if Mitchell Evans gets back and you're just like, okay, now Mitchell Evans gets back to playing like what we hoped he would be all season, the weapons you have in the pass game are significantly better than what they were last year. Significantly so. You just have to get to that point. And that's the question. Will they get there? And that's what we don't know. Can Mitchell Evans even get there? Does he want to get there? I don't know any of those questions. I don't know Mitchell at all personally. So, but if he figures it out, it's going to be huge for Notre Dame, and it'll be huge for him because he'll be able to kind of go remind people of who he is. And NFL teams are going to be like, oh, okay, yeah, he was struggling in the offense and this, that, and the other, and he's coming back from the injury. But boy, down that stretch and in the postseason, Mitchell Evans became that dude again. And you remind yourself of why he was a preseason All-American.
Oh, yeah.
Like if Mitchell Evans gets back to playing like the preseason All-American guy that we thought he was going to be, that's where I say he could have a humongous impact on this offense. So we're going to get the defense next, Trev. But before we do, folks, y'all know what to do. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. And, of course, as always, sign up for the message board at boards.archbreakdown.com. I'm telling you, folks, if you like actually knowing what's going on with football, if you like it at all, and you actually want to learn anything about football and you want to be an informed fan, you need to be a part of what we're doing at boards.archbreakdown.com. You look at those all 22 videos, listen to the people in chat that have watched the videos. They'll tell you. People say, "Oh, I'm watching games and I'm watching Riley Leonard read RPOs and I'm remembering the video you put up the week before and I'm able to see it now and I'm able to understand it now and call it out now." And that's kind of what we want to do is we want to help you all learn the game even more. Want to help you all be more informed fans and understand what you're seeing, which makes for much, much better conversation. And I've had a lot of people say, when I'm hanging out with Notre Dame friends, I start talking about the videos and I start talking about what you're talking about. And everybody's like, oh, that guy really knows what he's talking about. Because you do know what you're talking about, because we will help you really understand the game from a coaching level, which I think a lot of people like to do. So you see it in the chat, right? Connor Laws, appreciate you very much. Ball Peen Shillelagh can confirm those all 22 breakdowns are incredibly helpful. Pete Weber, those videos are the best. So that's kind of where we're at, man. We love doing that stuff, but you can only get that if you're a member at boards.irishbreakdown.com.